Well, I pride myself in letting go. I'm better off and stronger alone. I've got my freedom from choices made, freedom from being brave, freedom.
It's good to be back with everybody today. Thank you for coming back. It's always a good thing. So it was about 12 years ago. I was in the full-time ministry in Plattsmouth, Nebraska. And I was traveling to a Bible conference in Indiana with my family. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I was to speak at a local church here on that Sunday evening service. I was driving on Interstate 30, just south of Cedar Rapids, and I came over the hill just prior to getting to Interstate 13. And I noticed on the side of the road what looked to be some type of vehicle that had rolled over on its top. Looked like an SUV or a minivan. Just in the middle of the day, beautiful sunny day, Sunday afternoon in April. So I quickly pulled my minivan over to the side of the road because instinctively I thought this isn't right. I jumped out, and there's a person behind me did the same thing. We both jumped out. We ran up to it. I saw debris everywhere alongside the road. Got up to the vehicle. There was fluids and smoke, and the radio was blaring. And there was a boy inside screaming, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy." And I looked at the driver's side window. There was a woman hanging out of it. And she had a large gash from here, front of her head, to the back of her head. And I instinctively found a piece of clothing that was on the road and placed that on her, held her in my arms. She was, kind of twitching and moving around. The other man that was with me climbed inside the vehicle to be with this boy that was crying for his mother. And time for me slowed down. I held her there, and all I could think of in my mind was, she is going to die. What do I do? I pressed the white dress shirt over her head and held it there, and I talked to her and I said, "It's going to be okay. Do you know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? Because do you know this? Do you know this? Let me tell you how you can trust Christ as your Savior." And I, not knowing if she could hear me, I led her through the sinner's prayer in hopes that in those last few fleeting moments of her life, she could accept Christ as her Savior. If she had not done so she could spend eternity in heaven and not spend eternity in hell. I can remember as I think back in that moment that was what was instinctive for me to do at that time. But I even remember feeling such cognitive dissonance at that point, such a feeling of something I didn't know what it was. This woman's life is ending. There is untold stories and experiences that she's had throughout her life. And yet here it is, in just the last few moments, I am asking her to do this thing. Otherwise, her life seems to be without any particular meaning or purpose if she doesn't do this thing. The police arrived, and I told them, I said, well, she was alive when I got here. This was maybe 3 to 5 minutes. It's hard to tell. And I said, I think she's died. And she, in fact, had died. And long story short, they closed off the interstate there. They brought in the helicopter, the Jaws of Life, to get the boy out. Come to find out, the boy was actually a man, but he was her son, who she was taking. He was 30 years old, but he had special needs, and she was taking him to his care center in Mount Vernon, after coming from her husband's memorial service, who had died from cancer that prior fall. And so I ended up going to the church and speaking that night, and I was literally shaking. I mean, I was 25, 26 years old at the time, and this was just, I didn't even know how to process this. I mean, I had absolutely no training, no experience. This was just an earth-shattering, life-altering experience for me. But I spoke that night, and I remember there was maybe 150 people there, and I remember getting up and just forgetting what I was going to talk about and just poured myself into this message, which for me was all about what is important in life, right? You know, here I was faced with death and seeing a woman's life end in front of me, dying in my arms, literally. And I remember speaking to the people, and I remember telling them, folks, the only thing that matters in life is how you serve the Lord. The only thing that matters in life is how much you witness to other people and how much you devote your life to Christ and how much you do to lay up treasures in heaven. All these other things that we're concerned about, our house, our jobs, our experiences, our travel, taking care of this life. What's the point of it? Can't we understand? I remember saying, it doesn't matter the square footage of your house, folks. It matters your relationship to Christ and what you're doing to make the next life better. I ended up going to the conference that week that I was going to, and then coming back and actually going to the funeral service of this lady. And her family came up to me, and they thanked me so much for being able to be with her in her dying moments. And I shared with them some of the things I had said, and it brought them great comfort. But I share that story with you as kind of an introduction, and we'll go back to it here later, to this idea of our brief moment in the sun. That particular phrase was coined by the theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss. I'll share the larger quote with you at the end. But I think it's a wonderful way to express this idea of the brevity of life. That the earth and has been around for billions of years, the universe billions of years, and here we are kind of just slowly emerging on the scene as conscious creatures. And thousands of human generations have come and gone. Thousands of human generations will continue to exist. And we are just a blip on the screen, if you will. It's our brief moment in the sun. But because we do have such a highly evolved consciousness, we have this ability and luxury, if you will, to examine our lives, to struggle with this idea of meaning and purpose. Most of your pets that you have at home don't wrestle with this, do they? Have you ever come home in the afternoon and your dog is sitting on the couch with his legs crossed, contemplating the meaning of life? Have you had a long conversation with your dog? Maybe you have, and I would like some of that if you. No, no. They don't, do they? They're instinctive. They have things that drive them, and that's it for them. But human beings are uniquely different. We see our world for the first time as very young infants, don't we? We emerge on the scene out of non-existence. Try how many can imagine 100 years before they were born? You remember that time? It was a difficult time, wasn't it? And you're thinking, no, it wasn't a difficult time. What about 10,000 years before you were born, or 20 million years? Okay, there was no concerns. There was nothing. All of a sudden, we're on the scene, aren't we? You ever stopped and just been, have you ever really stopped and just been like, what is going on? It's like, have you ever just been there where you're like, I mean, yeah, I'm going to Walmart to get my groceries, but I'm like, really, what's going on here? Scientists have been able to show that really babies start to develop this idea of self-awareness, this idea of who they are distinct from the rest of the world between about 18 and 24 months. And they do this in ingenious ways that they show how babies can start recognizing themselves as unique individuals. And it's amazing to see that. But this is how we start to experience life. And we have a kind of a narrative of our life, don't we? We have kind of this idealized thing we think about when it comes to what life should be, or what life should have been, or what life can be. We think about our childhood. We're born on the scene. We're captivated by that brief and magical time we call childhood. It goes by too quick. And on occasion, I find myself briefly captured by the magic of my childhood. And I try to hang on to it. Sometimes it's just me, call it nostalgia, call it what you will. But it may be just a particular day, or sometimes just driving down a particular street where I've literally at times pulled over to the side of the road and just tried to hang on to that moment as long as possible. There it is. I feel it. I feel the sense of my youth, my childhood, the innocence that came with it, the newness of life. And then it evaporates very quickly, and zoop, you're back into the moment, right? But childhood is a great gift, and it's a wonderful thing that unfortunately does escape us all too quickly. There's a great quote here by George Eliot, the pen name for Mary Evans, the great 19th century British novelist. And she said this regarding childhood: "So much of our early gladness vanishes utterly from our memory, we can never recall the joy with which we laid our heads on our mother's bosom or rode on our father's back in childhood. Doubtless that joy is wrought up into our nature as the sunlight of long past mornings is wrought up in the soft mellowness of the apricot. But it is gone forever from our imagination, and we can only believe in the joy of childhood." It's sad to think about how much we forget about life, isn't it? Have you ever really stopped to think about how much you've forgotten about? Like, really stop to think about how many days of your childhood you can remember. There was thousands of them, but for most of us, we can only really briefly capture maybe just a few fleeting memories, things that really stick out in our mind, but for the majority of it, it's gone. It's gone, never to reappear. So we move on from our childhood, and we discover one of life's greatest joys, and that is love. It's nature's way of saying, hey, we need to keep this thing going, right? We need to keep this human experience going. So we exit our childhood, and we enter that time in our life in which we seek out what we all desire so much, and that is to love and to be loved. And that's what we hope for, right? That's what we're all striving for. That's what we're all wanting. That's what we feel like if we don't have it, there's something lost. We, again, as we did with our childhood, we reflect back on that first time we fell in love, and we think about how wonderful it was, and we romanticize it, and we think to ourselves, my gosh, look at these other people that are experiencing it. I wish I could find it. I wish I had it, or I'm so glad I have it. I hope I don't lose it. And sometimes we worry away our days thinking we might lose it, and we might be alone, and we might die alone. But we build our lives, don't we? We fall in love. We find that perfect mate for us, that person that's going to fulfill every nook and cranny of our life that's unfulfilled. They're going to find out who we really are, all our bad habits, our annoying things that we really tried to cover up at the beginning, right? And we did a really good job at doing it too. And but we let him in on it eventually once we felt comfortable enough. And we try to build an ideal life, don't we? And we think, boy, it'd be wonderful to have a life, to fall in love, to maybe have children, maybe not have children, but just to live this idealized American life. And that's even more exacerbated when you look at social media today. When you go on there and you just go through your timeline and you just see happy faces and you see people being successful and you see people, talking about their, oh, we're going to Jamaica for 2 weeks and this, that, and the other. And before you know it, after a few scrolls, you're depressed. You put the pillow on your head and you think to yourself, God, my God, why did I do that to myself? So we scramble to find happy pictures of us, and we think, well, we were happy that day. At least we looked like it. I'm going to post that. So we create this illusion, right? And we try to do it because that's what life's about, isn't it? Life is about being happy and being successful. And as we, again, struggle with meaning and purpose, we're trying to figure out what that is. We're trying to figure it out. As a child, we try to figure it out. As a teenager, we try to figure it out. But especially as we evolve as human beings, as adults, we start recognizing these higher levels of fulfillment, and we think to ourselves, what is it all about? And as we get closer to the sunset of our life, we really start to think about, what is this all about? What is the purpose of it all? What did I waste my life? Should I have done something differently? How can I end my life in the best possible way? How can I really cross that finish line? How can I have a strong finish? So we think about this as we kind of evolve through or experience this brief moment in the sun. And it's something we all struggle with, isn't it? We all continue to think I was talking to somebody earlier, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to live your life truly doing what you were passionate about? That is what life is about, isn't it? Is just really being able to dig into something you're passionate about, and just that's it, right? You could maybe, move into the wilderness and build yourself a log cabin and carve out make your own tools and clothe your children with the leaves of the forest and isn't that what life's about? Isn't it really? It's just about being at one with nature, and you just get up in the morning and you bathe in the stream, and then you go back into the house and you create this wonderful breakfast from food you killed the night before. Isn't that what life's about, really? That's what life's about. It's really just about embracing everything that is natural, right? That's the way that we truly live the fulfilled life. And we all live this happy, wonderful life, right? This is it. Don't we? Yeah? Huh? Yeah. We're all sitting here thinking, yeah, that's my life for sure. Gosh, I thought... And of course, though, we die, and that's an ending that we all have, right? We all know the punchline at the end, right? There's no surprise there. It's just a matter of not if, but when. But again, I'm not talking so much about death here. I'm talking more about the life and what it means to struggle with meaning and purpose. And that's what it's about. You read books, and some people will tell you that they know the purpose of life. They know the meaning of life. And those books fly off the shelves. There was an interesting book written a few years ago, you may have heard of it, called The Purpose-Driven Life. And sold tens of millions of copies. There's a hunger for that, right? There's a desire to tell me what my purpose is. Tell me what the meaning of all this is, because at the end of the day, sometimes it just doesn't make sense, right? But we have this kind of idealized life. This is how it goes. This is how it should go. This is how it will go. we die with our loved ones in our arms to rest for eternity. But that, of course, is not always the reality of the situation, is it? Most of us have struggled with pain and suffering in our own lives and in the lives of others that we love. I have close friends that have struggled severely with addictions. I've seen it impact their family, their kids. I've had close people to me have taken their lives. I've seen people struggle with depression. I myself have gone through difficulties, loss of a marriage. I struggle with myself, this idea of self-worth at times, and trying to figure out where my part is in all this. How do we make sense of it? And even the most successful people, the people you think to yourself, my gosh, you got barrels of money, fame, and fortune. Yeah, and they struggle, and they take their lives, and they are medicated beyond what they should be. And that's the reality of this world that we live in, isn't it? It's not all bad. No, I mean, at times it's good, right? At times it's really good. But there's some times where it's really bad. I've been there. Those nights where I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna go to bed, and I'm gonna climb into these covers, and if I never open my eyes again, I would be just fine. I would be comfortable with that. But there's been days where the day was amazing, and I thought to myself the very same thought, that if I went to bed tonight and this was my last day, I went out on a high note, and that was great. But there's these range of emotions, and they're there for a variety of reasons. A lot of it, of course, is back to what we talked about earlier, this idealized view of what the human experience should be. You got your act together, you're successful, people look up to you, you have wealth, you have security, you have all of these things, and whether you want to or not, you're constantly butting up against that and comparing yourself to it. Even today, this is a grainy photo I found online. This is of Hurricane Harvey this morning as they are picking up the pieces and continuing to thousands and if not hundreds of thousands of people's lives that they have built for themselves over sometimes decades now is lying in ruin. And as much as we want to say that material possessions don't bring us any happiness, well, I think material possessions do bring you happiness at times, if not for a while. But isn't that what life's about? Life's about stringing together moments of happiness. Sometimes that's material things. Sometimes it's not material things necessarily. Sometimes it's experiences. But these are all a product of our world that we live in, right? How many of us would want to go up to that lady right there who has a name and a face and a family and a story and say, cheer up, it's just your house? I don't know. That doesn't really necessarily ring true, does it? I mean, we want to say that, again, as I think about that day 12 years ago now, I think about my reaction to it, and now 12 years later, I look back, and I've often thought about that day, and certainly it did change me a lot in a variety of ways. But putting this together, this presentation, it was really the first time that I was able to sit back and contemplate deeply, fairly deeply, what that particular event really taught me and has taught me so far in this life, up to this point in my life. So I want to share with you very quickly here at the end 4 things that particular experience of seeing a person's brief moment in the sun come to an end, the sunset of their life, and what that taught me about life. And many of you in here are older than me and have experienced much more in life than me, and I love being able to talk to people with more experience that have been able to endure amazing things and reap the lessons from them and pass them to me. And I'm going to do that for you. And hopefully this is helpful to you. But I want to reflect on the lessons I learned from that day. 4 things that I learned as I laid there with that lady and she died in my arms. What are the 4 things looking back that I learned? Number 1, don't force your purpose on another human being. Part of being fully human is having the freedom and courage to shape our own lives. That day, I felt like I was doing a good thing by telling that woman that if she didn't trust Christ as her Savior, she needed to trust Christ as her Savior. Now, in the context of my life, that made entire sense at the time. But looking back on it now, I find that there is something wrong about that. Essentially, what I was trying to do is erase her entire life and say that in this last moment, if you can just erase everything you've done and adopt my worldview now, then you'll be good. Then you'll really, truly be human in the afterlife. But you know what? I think that dehumanizes people when we do that. We think that's sometimes a helpful thing, right? Oh my gosh, if you would just adopt the purpose of my life, or the meaning that in my life, if you would just get that and embrace it and do away with the life that you're living now, or the things that you value now, that you are somehow helping that person. And don't get me wrong, there's times where people need to have a course correct, right? So don't misinterpret. But I think sometimes we feel like we have all the answers and we need to make sure people understand that and do everything we can to make them change. As I said, being fully human is having the freedom and courage to shape our own lives. It's not easy to do as humans. It's not. We want to be told what to think. We do. We like it. We like it when somebody stands up with confidence and a little bit of direction and says, you're lost, but you know what? Follow me, I'll show you. Be careful. That's actually our slogan at the Humanists of Linn County now, is shape our own lives. Shape your own life, actually. Shape your own life. Be fully human. Have the courage to do that. And sometimes that means that you have to push back against your social network. Right? You have to push back against things that you've been taught to be important. And really, truly question those things. If you find yourself not doing that at all, you may have lost some of your humanity. Some of your soul may be lost to some degree. So that was the first lesson I've learned looking back. Don't try to do that. Don't try to superimpose your purpose and your meaning on somebody else. You're going to strip them of life's greatest gift. Number 2 that I learned that day, life will change you into another person, often with a different set of goals and desires. And that is okay. There was a study actually came out in 2013 from Harvard University, and quite interesting study actually. And one of the results of that was, and the study was really comparing people at different stages in their life, had them predict where they thought they were going to be in 10 years, then following that kind of same demographic of people and having them reflect back on their last 10 years and kind of study the discrepancy between that. What they found was that people vastly underestimate the amount that they are going to change in their life. It's called the paradox of history. which is simply the idea that we feel like we, in the present moment, have arrived in our life, right? So when you're 10 years old, you're 10 now, right? So you tell your other kids and your younger brothers and sisters. I remember listening to my two boys. One's 14. When they were younger, one was maybe 9, and the other one was 6. And Landon would just wax eloquent late into the night on their bunk beds about life and how things work. And it was just endless enjoyment of this delusional things that he would tell his younger brother, but of course his younger brother just soaking it up. And then of course I would hear his younger brother then tell his younger sister, about, this is what it's all about. But the same thing holds true when you're a teenager, and then you're 30, you've hit 30, and you tell those young college students, let me tell you about life, and let me, 40, and that's just it, right? We all feel like we've arrived, and we think that this is it. But an interesting thing, he said this, but there might be a reason for that. Believing that we just reached the peak of our personal evolution makes us feel good, right? Like we're kind of at the apex of our life, right? Man, the kind of I wish that I knew that I wish that I knew then what I know now experience might give us a sense of satisfaction and meaning, whereas realizing how transient our preferences and values are might lead us to doubt every decision and generate anxiety. My take on it is this. When I look back at that experience 12 years ago, comparing how I was then to where I am now, I am a vastly different person. Fundamentally, I am a different person. Biologically, I'm a different person. Every cell in my body has been replaced in 12 years. But fundamentally, my personality in many ways has changed, my viewpoints, the way I perceive the world, the way I interact with people has fundamentally changed. So much so that if I listen to myself 12, 13, 14 years ago or see a video of myself, I do actually view that person as a different person. I do not have a connection with that person. Think about that with your children. You see a video of your kids from 10 years ago, especially if they're younger. You don't even recognize who that, or even a year ago or 2 years ago. Who is this person? We change. The life will change you into another person, often with a different set of goals and desires, and that is okay. And that is part of life. That is part of this amazing, evolving human experience called sentience, called consciousness. Things are out of our control. We move. We are influenced by our biology. We're influenced by our surroundings. And whether we like it or not, we are going to change, and we just have to be along for the ride. But you know what it should teach us? It should give us a healthy dose of humility. Right? That the person you criticize today for their wacky belief system may be you in 10 years. Right? Third thing I learned on that road 12 years ago, bad things happen for no good reason at all. So stop trying to make sense of things and focus on prevention and cure. People like to tell you why things happen, right? We like to tell you why your child died, why you're, this televangelists, I'm sure right now are getting on radios and TVs and telling people why Texas is being hit with a hurricane because God is upset with the sinfulness of Houston or whatever. You heard that when Katrina hit, and we try to make sense of things, but you know what? The honest truth is, when I look back at that day and I see the randomness of this particular person's death, it was a beautiful day. There was no other cars involved. There were no skid marks. There was nothing that could even explain to this day why it even happened. She was a very wonderful person, very active in the community. Again, had just left her husband's memorial service to take one of her 2 special needs children back to a special needs home. What? 57 years old. Wow. We like to be told why it happened, right? You know why it happened. Great, I'm going to listen to you. Okay, but that's just really deception is what it is. Rather, we should just be honest and say that, terrible things happen. We don't know necessarily why it happened. I mean, we can tell you how it happened. Car flipped off the road. The, atmospheric pressure combined with, these trade winds from this, combined to make this hurricane form in this particular. But why it happened? We don't know that. Why it happened? Why all these things, just randomly happen? We don't know. But, let's not focus. For me, again, I'm expressing to you what I've learned is I'm not going to worry about why those things happen. I'm going to put my effort towards preventing those things from happening again, or helping the situation after it's happened, donating to the Red Cross, right? Doing tangible things that can help solve the problem. And number 4, how unexamined my life was. Socrates said in Plato's writings that the unexamined life is not a life worth living. I'm not necessarily sure if that's true or not, but it is interesting, isn't it? That oftentimes we do kind of go through life on autopilot, right? And we don't sometimes take the time to really step back and say, okay, what the heck am I doing? Why am I doing it? But that's important. I think the examined life is important. Very important. And I kudos to you for meeting like you do and having these discussions and bringing somebody like myself in to really help you kind of reflect maybe on some of your preconceived notions or things that you've kind of been embedded in you, right? That constant ability to challenge oneself, which is not sometimes very comfortable, right? We like to get into that bubble and we like to stay there because it's secure. But I would challenge you to, throughout your life, as often as you can, ask yourself 2 questions ongoing, constantly. And that is, number 1, is what I believe true and is it good? Is it true? Is it actually true what I believe? And is it a good thing that I believe it? I'm just going to leave that there. Number 2, am I doing what I believe to be good and true? I went through that. I had to examine myself at a time where when I said, is what I believe true and good, I got to the point where I had to say no to one of those and maybe to the other. And on that second one, am I doing what I believe to be true and good? No, I was not. And I had to make the very difficult decision to make a drastic change in my life. It was not easy, but it was necessary. So to just review, first thing, don't force your purpose on another human being. Don't do it. Life will change you into another person, often with a different set of goals and desires, and that is okay. Bad things happen for no good reason, so stop trying to make sense of things and focus on prevention and cure. Number 4, examine your life. And then as I told you earlier, I'm going to end with a quote by, again, the theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss. He's got, and he has this quote that I think is a great quote. A universe without purpose should neither depress us nor suggest that our lives are purposeless. Through an awe-inspiring cosmic history, we find ourselves on this remote planet, in a remote corner of the universe, endowed with intelligence and self-awareness. We should not despair, but should humbly rejoice in making the most of these gifts and celebrate our brief moment in the sun. Thank you so much.